I am recording every word of this for my new podcast series, which is called Succeed with ADHD Anyway. So let's begin with a definition. Executive functions. What on earth is that? Are you familiar with that term? Raise your hand if you are. Okay, who would like to volunteer a definition for that? Yes?
My understanding is that it has to do with more complicated, higher decision-making functions.
Complicated higher decision functioning. Okay? A good working definition of executive functions is the abilities that allow us to take all of the information in from the environment and then plan an organized response. So the biggest challenge of people with executive functioning challenges is they know a lot, but they can't do a whole lot with it. So one of the biggest challenges for kids in the classroom especially is the teachers always say, you're so smart, you should be able to do this. You're so good in this area, how come you can't be good in the other areas as well? But what do we already know? It's a problem of execution, not intelligence. Does that make sense? So you can have the smartest kid in the world that seems to do dumb things. But it's not a dumb thing. It's a problem of execution. So what we're going to do through this time we have together is break down the various, and there are many, at least 11, specific executive functions, how they show up in life, what kind of problems they cause, and I'll give you one or two ways to accommodate them so that the people in your life that are challenged by this, may even include you, can succeed and be effective anyway. How does that sound? So let's start with a common one, response inhibition. An easier term is impulsivity. Now, how would you imagine this would show up? You want to volunteer? Ladies and gentlemen, my eldest son, Zachary.
You know I always screw with my brothers. I always do it out of impulsivity.
So you mess with your brothers and it's out of impulsivity. What exactly does that mean to you?
I just do it without thinking naturally.
Do it without thinking. So there's not really a plan involved in that action. It just kind of happens. There is a difficulty thinking before acting. It just happens that fast. You see it with a lot of kids with ADHD. You also see it because, raise your hand if you have a child on the spectrum, okay, or work with them. There's a lot of overlap between the spectrum and executive functions. You will see these a lot in that population as well. So these are the kids that blurt out in class. They'll feel like doing something and simply do it. And you'll say, why'd you do that? I don't know.
They wanted to.
And see, if they wanted to, that implies there was some forethought. Sometimes the urge just shows up and they act. That's impulsivity. Now, it's not to say that they can't learn to think beforehand. It's just that presently they don't. So you're going to hear their blurting out in class. You're going to see poking of fellow students. Some of these kids will say, oh, it'd be neat to push that book off the desk, and they just do it. And you want to think there's choice there, because ideally that's what they're going to get to. But at the moment, they probably don't have it. So what can you do?
Hide the electronics.
Hide the electronics? How does hiding the electronics help with a kid that's blurting out in class? I know, grasping at straws. I appreciate your participation.
Taking away what could be an impulse action.
Taking away what could be an impulse action. Can you go a little further with that?
I was just told this one the other day. There was a little girl for a before school program who came in from playing in the gym and wanted to color. And because the coloring was out, she just picked it up and started doing it. Well, she wouldn't have been she wouldn't have had the impulse to do it if she hadn't seen it. So taking away the visual distractions.
Okay, so what you are referring to is a visual trigger or a visual cue. She wants to color, and because the opportunity presented itself, because she saw things to color with, she just started doing it. So for kids that poke other kids, we must remove all other children.
Sounds good. 1-to-1 ratio.
No, I think of all human beings in the room.
Okay. You want to say something?
We work on teaching kids expected versus unexpected.
Expected versus unexpected. Go a little further.
Here's, verbalizations in small group, and then work with the teachers to practice carryover.
Kids that have a lot of impulsivity are used to working without a plan. So what do they need to learn how to do? Plan, okay? So if there is a specific behavior that they're doing impulsively, we need to attach some proactivity to that. As you said, expected versus unexpected. If there are certain things you want the child to either stop doing entirely or find a replacement for, first they need to be aware of what the behavior is. You're always blurting out in class. You're always poking your classmates. Blurting out is a very common one. So the first thing they need to do is make a decision to take responsibility for that behavior. Doesn't mean it's their fault if they keep doing it. They need to change their relationship to it. So it's not the I can't help it, it's not my fault. It's now I want to be aware of it so I can learn to take ownership of it. Then the plan becomes first monitoring, being aware of when it happens. Because if you don't take responsibility for anything, why would it even be on your radar? So a lot of these kids aren't even aware of it because they don't care. I can't help it. It just happens. So you begin by bringing it into their awareness. Because the basic rule of personal growth and change is you cannot change what you do not acknowledge. So they first have to acknowledge its existence and that they have some role in producing it. Then maybe their responsibility is to keep a log. How many times they do it. Also have the teacher keep a log. They can compare notes. See who caught more of them. One thing I've seen work pretty effectively in classrooms is because you want to take the response inhibition and teach some inhibition. So after you find out how many times they're doing it, well, I counted 15, you counted 10. What do you say? From now on, you only get to do that 5 times. So now they need to be much more aware of how many times they're doing it. My middle son, Zach's younger brother, has an autism spectrum diagnosis, ADHD, and Tourette's. So imagine how much he's got to hold in. So unfortunately, he tries to hold his tics in sometimes, but they kind of come out other ways. But what he has learned by being much more aware of this, he's learned what his body feels like right before it happens. Sometimes it feels like his whole body is tingling all over. Sometimes it feels numb. It's like the energy building like a volcano. In the past, he'd say, it just happens. My whole body just jerks and my face just grimaces. Because he wasn't paying attention to his body. It was simply happening. The more aware of that he became, he began seeing the precursor. Now he's learning how to direct that into something else. So it doesn't have to come out as a tic. So a lot of those experiences with these kids, the impulse is preceded by something in their body, some feeling. If they become aware of it and can learn a way to channel it, you have now successfully reduced their impulsivity.
My son, when he's trying to tell you that something is very, very excited about, he will just laugh, and his nose, he's doing respiratory disease in school, and that his speech therapist that he's working with has said, can you do that without clapping? He said, no, I can't. So she's using video modeling with him and actually taping him so he could see, like, this is what you look like to others.
Well, that kind of has a mixed bag of implications. She talked about using a video modeling with her son when he flaps and he's excited. That has a high potential of shaming a child, a high potential of embarrassment.
So what would a dialogue be like after, like, my son, he likes to yell out just made-up strange words that'll catch everybody's attention, and, it's hard not to make it such a negative thing, like shaming them. So what would
Well, you shame and punish a child because you're embarrassed. Okay? So that's, as a parent, your issue, and that's nothing your child needs to inherit. Okay? So one thing that must take place is that those need to be treated as teachable moments. The first thing you're teaching is self-awareness. Hey, did you catch what you did just then? That was interesting. Why'd you do that? I don't know. Okay, let's work on knowing. What do you think? Let's develop some awareness around this. Start bringing the awareness first. Around the flapping issue, when he says, I can't help it, what were his exact words?
Something to that effect, like I can't explain.
I can't help it, I can't do anything else. Here's an important principle. Your tendencies are not your destiny. Okay, he's always done it that way, but he hasn't considered a plan B. Why? Flapping works. He feels more regulated. He feels better. He feels calmer. Why should I replace it? So his believing is I can't, when the reality is I haven't considered other options. So instead of putting a camera in his face and trying to embarrass him out of doing it anymore, just help him reframe his answer, reframe his belief, which is it possible that you haven't tried other things? Okay, so is it possible other things might work? Yes, let's explore some of those. Because there are situations in life where you absolutely want to allow yourself to flap. Because anybody here who has not flapped does not know what they're missing. Okay? It can be very cathartic. I flap in action movies. Thank goodness the theater's dark. Because there's some times where only that will do. And there are other times where I give myself deep pressure. I'll squeeze into my thigh muscle, or I'll press my hands together to regulate that enthusiasm. James?
I think another thing, too, is also giving kids places where they can analyze their behavior.
Such as?
I remember times when growing up, my parents, we would deconstruct situations for long amounts of time just so I could learn.
One of the most exciting things about what he said was taking time to deconstruct the situation. There was a young man I just started working with last night, probably in his late teens, early 20s, who was unaware of a lot of the things that he does, that in social situations might be considered problematic, inappropriate, one of my trigger words. And one of the things that we discussed doing with his parents was exactly what James described. In a situation where this behavior shows up, sit down, start with what he saw. Tell me about the situation we were just in. What did you recognize? What did you realize? Now the parents chime in. That conversation is one of the best ways to find out what your child is filtering out. Did you see the look on their face? No. Did you notice the tone of their voice? Kinda. Because it's important to know what they already see. What's their foundational experience? Because we have a lot of understanding about what it means to be on the spectrum. Missing nonverbal cues, missing vocal tone. But we know it's not true for everyone. We don't all filter out the same stuff. I miss a lot of facial cues. I'm very, very auditory, so I listen more to vocal inflection. But if somebody's giving me a message with their face, I'm probably going to miss it. So if they're not telling me how they're feeling, I won't know. Unless their facial expression's really exaggerated. Then what I usually do is say, tell me how you feel about that. Because I want them to translate what their face is doing. So if you deconstruct, like James pointed out, you have the opportunity to ask those questions to find out what they're missing. And some of us, no matter how many social skills classes we take or how many face charts you show us, our brain's not going to rewire itself to suddenly see facial cues. Make sense? How can you train somebody to spot things their brain filters out? The next executive function is working memory. Who's heard that term before? Who knows what it is, though? Want to hazard a guess?
Sure. I guess the way I think of working memory is when a set of directions, for example, have been given for a task that you have to then follow within 5 minutes from that. So a short amount of time from when you learn that information, you have to retrieve it.
Very good example. Working memory is the ability to hold information in your brain long enough to use it. So the teacher has just given you a set of instructions. Now you have to keep it in your head long enough to follow those instructions. If you got poor working memory, your brain may as well be made of Teflon. I had some testing done about a year and a half ago. My working memory is in the 3rd percentile. So if you say to me, I want you to remember something, good luck. I need to write it down. I have so many lists in my computer, even things I do every single day. Because if I don't forget the event, I will likely forget the sequence. So I need some kind of plan, a written, concrete plan that I can go back to because my memory is so unreliable. And there are so many teachers or even parents that say, I told him, I looked him right in the eye and I told him. And he said he understood. And then later, I asked him what he did and he said, I forgot. That is a working memory issue. If there is not a concrete plan for this child to follow through on what they agreed to, can't hold them to it. It's not reasonable. There needs to be something they can go back to. I've got a young man that I work with. He's got an iPhone. Although he's in the same classes every single day, and the routine doesn't change, he forgets it every single day. We loaded his phone up with reminders. So it buzzes in his pocket to let him know when his class is about to end. What does he need to make sure that he has the teacher do before he leaves the classroom? Sign his assignment notebook. When he gets to the next class, what does he have to be able to unpack and take out and get ready? He needs these reminders every single day. And before we put those reminders in his phone, he was maybe 40 to 60% proficient at remembering to do that. Now he's like 95% from that one accommodation. I would be able to accomplish little, if anything, without my reminders and my lists. So my memory is just that unreliable. So if you want a child with working memory issues to remember something, watch them write it down. Make sure they keep it on them. If they need something to remind them that they even have it, give them that too. I have things that buzz and beep all day long. Keeps me on track. Because otherwise, I'll forget what I have to do. Make sense? Next one is a real tricky one. Emotional control or emotional regulation. This is basically kids whose emotional experience can be off the charts. They just don't experience anxiety, they experience panic. They're not just happy, they're manic. They're not sad, they're depressed. So they feel their emotions very intensely. There's one young lady that I work with who has difficulty regulating her own happiness. So when something comes on TV that she likes, she can't handle the intensity of her own emotions. So she leaves the room, she peeks around the corner to look at TV, she starts to feel it elevate, then she'll peek around the corner again. So she allows herself to be stimulated in doses so it doesn't get out of control for her. One of the most unfortunate pieces of advice these kids are given is, you need to learn to calm down. Really? That's it? I'm cured. Yeah.
Well, my rage quits. Or like my rage experience inside school.
Your rage experiences at school? Do you remember any of those?
Of course I do.
Do you want to talk about them?
Well, yeah, sure, although you could probably say it better than I could.
No, but this is your experience. You can talk about it better than I could.
Liquid
Do you want to stand up and face the audience?
Liquid Falls, when I was like 5 and 6, this was the precursor to us finding out our autism line. I could not cope. The teachers weren't doing what they needed to accommodate me because we didn't know, and I would just go into these spiraling rages, like saying like above 10 if there was a scale, and I would like run out of classrooms. I would start hitting. According to him, I even kicked holes in walls.
Yeah, he tried to kick his bedroom door off the hinges. He kicked holes in the hallways when he would get into his rages. That was before he learned emotional control. The common way this shows up in the spectrum is low frustration tolerance. Your kids have that? The simplest thing ticks them off. Because, again, frustration turns into fury. So it's not always a matter of inflexibility or stubbornness. It could be emotional regulation. But again, this is something that can be taught. an essential piece of regulating your emotions is the thoughts that come along with the emotional experience. Because you can have a feeling of anxiety and then start having a conversation about what that means. I'm a little nervous. That must mean something's wrong. That must mean there'd be something in danger. Oh my goodness, if something like that happens, oh, well, what could happen? Then the sky could fall, and so on and so forth, and you whip yourself up into a frenzy. So one way you can intervene is with their self-talk. One question that I asked Zach, his brothers, and everybody I work with is, what went different than you wanted it to? Because if there's an expectation that things will go well, so that you can feel calm, cool, and collected, but something goes different, you might respond with fear, anxiety, anger. So the first step is, what was it? Now, the question is key. I didn't ask what went wrong. Did something bad happen? Because those are very emotionally charged words. You want to ask what went different, very neutral. Because not only do you have expected and unexpected behaviors, you have expected and unexpected events. We call that life. Anybody have any unexpected events on the way here this morning? Yeah. If you raise your hand, you weren't paying attention. Okay? If your hand is down, you lie about other things too. And plenty of unexpected events this morning. But when you anticipate unexpected events, do they surprise you anymore? Are they cuss-worthy? Not as much. So one of my rules of life is things can go one of two ways. The way you plan, or they can go different. And if you always plan for those two potential outcomes, you will always be right. So when it goes different, you can say, I knew it! Because I planned for this. And if it's not expected, what do you have to be upset about? So this is a wonderful way to teach these kids who react with surprise. If it goes different, you know that it goes different. It's gone different before, and it didn't kill you. So why would you now have an internal dialogue to escalate yourself into panic? Yes?
When you mentioned self-talk, especially in situations where you're in a hurry, like you need to get ready for school, you need to find your shoes, get your backpack ready, then he'll come back with, you said I was lazy or stupid or whatever. And I was, where did that enter the conversation?
Are you saying that he changed the subject on you? You'll tell him in the morning, you got to get your shoes on, you got to get your backpack, and then he'll talk about something else.
Well, he'll bring up some kind of negative self-talk, distraction.
I suspect what he does in that moment, he'll just bring up out of the blue, you said I was lazy. I suspect that has a greater function than just negative self-talk. Who has any suspicions here? Speak up. I know there's more brilliance in the room than I have between my two ears. Come on. Bask us in the glow. Say something. Yes.
Distract you.
It's a way of just, I don't want to do it.
Okay. So it's a way of saying, I don't want to do it.
Maybe the individual has something stopping him, but he's too scared of telling you because he's scared you're going to judge him. So he just says, I'm lazy because he doesn't know how you're going to respond if he tells you why he can't do it.
Or maybe he doesn't know either. He just knows something's not working.
Or maybe he doesn't know, yeah.
Or he's feeling too rushed. And who's doing the rushing? So he needs to stop you. You're rushing him. Let's change the subject so she gets off her to-do list. And we can talk about a tangential idea. Kids are smarter than we often give them credit for. The next one, the fourth executive function, is pretty much the hallmark of ADHD. Sustained attention. I spent my entire school career being told, Brian, pay attention. Brian, pay attention. And I didn't know I was spaced out until a teacher said something and snapped me to. And what are kids with sustained attention issues told all the time? You're not trying hard enough. You're just being lazy. You need to be more motivated. Is it really that simple? It's been demonstrated through research that there's an imbalance of chemicals in the brain that sabotages sustained attention. That's what all these wonderful ADHD meds are for, to stimulate the production of those chemicals so you can attend. I went for a week without my med because my doctor was not returning phone calls. I was a basket case. I could barely function. I couldn't pay attention long enough to do anything. It was exhausting. When my younger two are not on their meds, they are like little Energizer bunnies on speed. They have all this energy, but it has no direction. Why? Because you can't focus it. If you don't have sustained attention, how can you direct your own attention? It simply doesn't work. Research has demonstrated that so far, what we know, medication is the best. It's also the easiest. Exercise can be helpful. Because what does exercise do? There's a natural body chemical, adrenaline. That's why some of those people that wait till the last minute to do things, then they're running around frantically. What have they just facilitated for themselves? With time pressure, adrenaline release. So all of a sudden, they are focused in a way they've never been focused before. And you tell them, don't procrastinate. It always drives you crazy. Yeah, but I'm able to get so much done. That's because they don't have any other tools prior to that to help them focus. So that's an indication somebody who does that, a serial procrastinator, probably has some executive function issues and needs some tools up front so that they don't have to wait till the last minute and cause themselves a panic and everyone in their life to want to kill them just so they can get a paper done.
Sorry, I've got a quick question about the exercise.
Hmm?
When it comes to the exercise, is it just the walking or is it the deep pressure? Like, should they be lifting weights? And what would the difference be and when would you use it? Is that
One or both, or yes, absolutely. Because one thing you absolutely want, you asked about the exercise that helps, bilateral stimulation, working both sides of the body, because you want the two brain hemispheres talking to one another. Things that cross the midline. Toe touches the opposite foot, reaching to one knee with both hands and pulling it up into your chest. Just by virtue of crossing your midline with your body, gets the two hemispheres talking to each other. The next function is task initiation. That's fancy for the first step, getting started. You give those directions, say, okay, I want you to do this, then do this, then do this, and the kid sits there. Is it a problem of motivation? It's a problem of not knowing how to take the first step. Also, people that procrastinate, it can look like they're blowing it off, they're dilly-dallying. It's often they have no concept of what the first step even is, let alone how to take it. This is a challenge that I have. I have a big project in front of me. There are all these different factors. I have no idea which one is the most important one to begin with. And fortunately, I have the awareness around this. I'll say to my wife, can you help me problem solve this a little bit? I have a lot to do here. I really want to get started. I just don't know where to start. And because I can ask for that and identify the issue, she'll say, sure, let's talk about it. We'll talk it through, and sometimes as I hear her thinking it through, the first step emerges. It hits me, then I know where to start. Or she has to point it out to me. Then I'll know where to begin. So coming up to a student and embarrassing them in front of the students saying, what are you waiting for? An engraved invitation? This is what the nuns said to me in Catholic school. But they make it seem like all of these different challenges are pure choice. If you don't do what was asked, it's because you have oppositional defiant disorder. You don't like authority. You just like proving that you're in charge, don't you? No, I have task initiation issues. I don't know where to start, but I don't know that's the issue. I know something's not working. I know I want to begin, but my brain just isn't doing it, but I have no idea how to tell you. So how do you think you help a child with task initiation issues? The simplest thing is to simply say, okay, I've given you all these instructions. What are you going to do first? If they say, well, I don't know. Oh, okay, well, let's look at what you understand the instructions to be. They might say, oh, I forgot them already. Okay, so it's only task initiation. There's a working memory issue here. Just by having that conversation, you get to know the student, what they caught and what they didn't. Because I was in an IEP meeting last week, one of the more frustrating of my life, where the homeroom teacher insisted that she looked the student in the eye and he understood everything she said. He knew what I meant. He knew what my expectations were. I looked him right in the eye and he looked back at me and I knew he understood. Did you clarify? Oh, I didn't need to. I could tell. This teacher was unteachable. And lo and behold, it's her classes where he has the greatest difficulty. There's another teacher he works with. This gentleman gets it. I wish we could duplicate him. He has structured accommodations for this boy. He knows how to tap into his self-awareness and encourage him to become more observant of the things he does in class. And this boy is doing much better in that man's class because he's taken the time to get to know the young man. Where are the hiccups in his problem solving? How can he be supported? So in my case, because of my working memory, I look at the instruction, and then often, as I'm looking over to do it, I've already forgotten it. So I have to look back and forth several times before it sticks. So what it takes my wife to do in about an hour, it takes me an afternoon. Different skill set. The next executive function, planning and prioritizing. In order to plan and prioritize, you have got to be able to conceive of a roadmap of how you're going to get from point A to point B, just like what Winter explained. Longer-term project, whether it's something you're doing in art class that requires many steps, whether it's a research paper that you have to do, whether it's something as simple as take out your pen, take out this book, turn to this page, get out this worksheet, complete these questions. Kids with significant planning and prioritizing issues, that can be a daunting task. Because even though you just gave them an order, while they're scrambling and trying to remember all the different things you said, they may not remember them in the order you said them. So all of a sudden, it seems kind of discombobulated. They'll be, clumsy and going into the backpack 3 or 4 times, forgetting to do certain things. And this is one of my friends on Facebook mentioned this, and I'm going to have to tell her about this so that I know what the issue is. Her son, and I have this challenge too, you tell him to go in the kitchen and find something. He opens a full cabinet, it's right in front of his eyes, and he can't see it. How many of you know someone like this? Okay? Yeah, I bet you they're all your husbands, right? It's a prioritization issue. If your brain does not know how to pick out from everything which is most important, everything has the same importance. I have that difficulty all the time. When we're grocery shopping, can you go and find this? It's on, especially if it's small. Can you go find this spice for me? They're all about 2.5 inches tall, and they all have the same label, the same colors. They don't stand out. Unless it was doing the Macarena in front of me, I wouldn't spot it. It's so hard to find it because my brain doesn't prioritize well. This can also look like a task initiation issue because it isn't so much that they don't know how to start, they don't know which one is the most important. So when you talk to them about their thought process, what do you remember about the instructions? Which one are you going to do first? And if they say something along the lines of, there's just so many things to do, they all kind of feel important, and, I could do this one or I could do that one. That kind of haggling is a prioritization issue. Does that make sense? So often, people that really struggle with that need to be talked through. What are you going to do first? Okay, what does it make sense to do next? And then how about after that? If their brain doesn't do it automatically, they kind of need to do that in partnership with someone else. Then once they have the plan and it's written, then they have a greater likelihood of following it. Does that make sense? As opposed to saying, you're going to be expected to do this in college. You got to learn to do it on your own. You know what they have an increasing number on college campuses these days? Student services department that have accommodations that are heads and tails over what K through 12 offers. And a lot of people in the traditional school system are not aware of this. Because whereas people are legally mandated to go through K through 12, where are they not mandated to go? Okay? So you think maybe colleges would go above and beyond to accommodate their consumer? A lot of them are realizing that. They need to market to get more and more bodies in there. And I'm seeing all these articles lately that saying college isn't really necessary. So maybe the colleges are going to work even harder to make it a friendly place to be. Some of the accommodations I hear at the college level that they just offer you are things that students typically need to go to due process for to get in the K through 12. Very different thinking. Now let's talk about organizing and sequencing. Organizing in general basically means you have your life and your space set up so that there's a place for everything. You know where your shirts are, you know where your shoes are, you know where your pens and pencils are. If you have difficulty organizing, what does your desk look like? It looks like yours. Okay, would you like to expand on that?
I call it organized chaos.
Organized chaos. Wonderful rationalization. That's what I call mine too.
Piles. Every drawer has a pen. Doesn't matter which drawer it is.
Yeah, every drawer has a pen. You just kind of put it where there's an opening. Stacks of papers, there's no real logic to it. So kids that have organizational issues at school, what are their lockers going to look like? It's just shoved in there, right? What does their bedroom look like? Clean your room. Oh, it looks immaculate. Let's look in the closet. There's a big pile. Let's look under the bed. That's how I organize. I cleaned my room when I was a kid by shoving everything under the bed. So if these kids have organizational issues, what's the best way to support them? If the key to organization is that everything has a place, help them determine places to put things. If it's their papers, create a binder system. If it's their locker, maybe put some labels up there. This is the only thing that goes here. This is its space. Some kids need labels on their drawers, on their dressers, to remind them this is where socks go, this is where pants go. Otherwise, you'll never find it in the same place twice. It'll be like a scavenger hunt to get dressed in the morning because of the poor organization. And once you help them set up that system, so long as they follow it, all of a sudden organization is there. And they can duplicate it over and over and over again. Does that make sense? Are you guys having flashbacks over here?
I'm like the opposite extreme. Everything has.
Oh, you're the opposite extreme.
So we were conversing about that.
It's not quite diagnosable though, right?
No, not quite
Okay.
that far. It's slow.
It's close.
My coworkers.
See, one thing that would be beautiful about you being so organized is if you were to come up with some kind of one-page itemized list of what you do. So you come up with a strategy guide that your colleagues can tap into. This is a system that she uses for organizing this or organizing that. Let's see if it'll work for you. Seriously. Now you guys can hold her accountable. Where's my book? Yes.
So let's say that you've done that throughout the child's life, trying to get them reorganized, trying to find all that. And now they live in another place, and certain rooms almost have a hoarding kind of a look. What do you do then?
Something tells me that this is relevant to you. Okay. A child that you have organized their entire life and now certain rooms have a hoarding quality to them. Is that a room that there has been no system developed for?
Pretty much. She discarded furniture when she moved because it was heavy. She didn't think it was important to take. And so now there's stuff.
So what executive function do you think that she needs to really emphasize when it comes to dealing with a hoarding situation? Yep. Planning and prioritizing. Because it can't all be important. Some stuff needs to go. So there needs to be some criteria to determine what do we keep. Some of the simplest I've heard is you keep it, you trash it, or you donate it. 3 options. So those are the 3 different sections you divide it into. And it's pretty easy to go through it. And then the stuff that's left over that you're keeping, now you need an organizational system. Where's the stuff going to go? If it turns out there's not a place for everything, all right, let's go back to the first list. What do we keep, toss, or donate? So that's the approach to take. Yes?
to get them to keep it organized? I mean, like a accordion folder, for example. Now, there's a label for every subject.
Okay, he's got an accordion folder,
Yeah.
but you can't get him to keep it organized. What's one of the issues with an accordion folder, folks? You open it, all looks the same. 3-ring binder with colored folders. They really jump out. And I'm not talking different shades of blue. Red, blue, green. It's got a pop. And if you also put a label on top of it, like math is red, you either remember math or you remember red. But it's so distinct, it's easier to find it. It's got to really jump out. Because again, planning, prioritizing issues, the more it looks the same, the more it's a source of confusion instead of organization. Because of my planning and prioritizing, I have so many checklists. I use a free app called Wunderlist. Wonder is spelled with a U instead of an O. And here's the beautiful thing about it. I can have the same list every single day in the order I want it, because you can do drag and drop, so you can change the order of things. As soon as I click on the checkbox, it kind of disappears into the background, so I know I've done it. So after my list is completed, at the end of the day, I can go back and unhide everything, so the list is new again. Because with some kids, you don't want to waste paper. They're afraid of checking it off. They forget to print out the new one the next day. We're in the digital age, folks. If you can make it digital and make it that user-friendly, it's that much easier to use. So my start of the day, the things I need to do in the morning to get started, I got my checklist for that. What I need to make sure I have with me to present, I have my list for that. I go through and check them off so that I decrease the likelihood of saying, darn it, I knew I forgot something, because my working memory sucks, so I can't use that. I need my list. And as long as I stick to those tools, I do pretty darn well. So the people that know me and say, you don't seem to have any challenges. Really? Let's spend a day together. My wife would probably pay you. Next skill, time management. One of my difficulties with time management is I don't know what the experience of time passing feels like. It's hard for me to tell the difference between 5 minutes and 35 minutes. If I'm in a room that doesn't have a clock, I freak, because I don't know how long I've been there. I need my phone, I need my watch, I need a clock, I need something. Some kids with this, you'll ask them, so how long do you think that's going to take you? Well, I don't know. Or it's something that you know is going to take a long time, but they'll wait till the last minute. And it's not necessarily procrastination, it's because they have no concept of what's going to be involved. Last weekend I had a full day of projects that I was going to do. Oh, I just know this is going to take me hours. It took me 20 minutes. So I really overshot it. I just really don't have a sense of how long things are going to take. So kids with time management issues, how can you teach them better time management? Yes?
I have a clock that has the red dial.
The time timer. Are you familiar with the time timer? It's a clock that instead of having numbers, if you turn it, it's white to begin with, but then as soon as you move it from 0 to 15 minutes, you see 15 minutes worth of red space. And that red space gets smaller as you get closer to being done. It's a really, really important visual tool. It's beautiful. I have the time timer app on my phone. One thing that's really helpful, especially if somebody needs to organize their day, their college day, their study schedule, you begin by helping them estimate. How long do you think it's going to take? Well, I don't know, maybe 5 minutes, maybe an hour. Okay, you do the task, and we're going to time you to see how long it takes you. This really works well for routine tasks. That way, if this is something that happens again, they know how long it took them last time, so they now know that they need to carve that much time out to do it. When they're planning studying for a specific test, completing a certain assignment, they know from past experience, you need this much time. And ideally a calendar too, because if you have difficulty with time management, you typically don't know what kind of free time you have in the course of your day. Oh, I got a lot of work to do. And because you're not planning it well, you're going to work for a while, then you're going to get distracted by your video game for a couple hours, and you'll remember you have work to do, and you'll come back, and no time efficiency. But if you make appointments with your activities, I know that this activity takes me 45 minutes. Where can I do that? I'll do it from 9 to 9:45. And on my calendar, I don't have anything else again until noon, so I have that much of a time block. What can I put in there? Well, I have this whole list that I've been compiling of all the different activities that I could possibly do in my life and how long they take me. So now I can just cut and paste things into my schedule. You see how that works? It takes probably some time and commitment to accumulate that information. But once you've got it, somebody with absolutely awful time management can really benefit from that. The next one is goal-directed persistence. We can also call that follow-through problems. They know where to start. They come out of the gate strong, but then they lose steam. This is the kind of person who says, yeah, I'm on your team. This is the best idea I ever heard. I can't wait to do it. They get 2/3 of the way there, totally fizzle out. Why do you think that is? Just for whatever reason, they have a hard time maintaining their momentum till they get all the way to the end. Now, it's not distractibility, because distractibility happens more often and with shorter intervals. Getting distracted every 5 seconds. This isn't a sustained attention issue, because you can see somebody who has spent a couple hours on something, and as they're about to get to the finish line, they say, man, I'm so tired, I need to take a break. Now, you finish it, guys. You got this. They have a hard time seeing it through. So what do you do about that?
Break it up into smaller sections.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Break it up into smaller sections. Because one of the things that happens, and this is especially people who tend to hyper-focus, they forget that things like breaks exist. So they totally lock onto the activity and they work it to exhaustion. So even though they're almost at the finish line, they just don't have anything left. They've totally burnt themselves out. So they walk away from it. This is too hard. I don't want to do this. No, you didn't take any breaks. There's one young man that I work with who does this when he has to study for tests. He wants to spend the entire day just locked into that, and what he misses, because he's so focused, he's getting increasingly anxious, he's not eating, he's getting tired, and he's sabotaging himself ad nauseum in terms of his ability to absorb that information. He says, I was prepared, I studied, but I blew the test. It's because the strategy you used caused you more problems than it solved. We need a better strategy that includes breaks so you don't have a problem with keeping your momentum up. The next one is flexibility. I imagine you see this a lot and call it something else. You're stubborn. You're willful. Raise your hand if your student or child has transition issues. Okay? That's a problem with flexibility. What it essentially means is you're not flexible in your response to a situation. So you plan one outcome and something else happens and you are unable to adapt to it. You're not flexible in your ability to switch from your initial plan to your secondary plan. Remember we talked about this earlier? It doesn't go wrong, it goes different. The kids who have a big issue with this, it shows up in what appears to be inflexibility. And you'll tell them, you need to be more flexible. Really? It'd be nice. Now again, with any executive function, there is a tool in there that you can use to help them learn to bend. And it begins with expectation. Same strategy as earlier. One thing I did with the boys, especially my young man here, when Zach was younger, whenever I'd take him on errands for a little one-to-one time, how long does it take to get there? How many miles? What time are we going to arrive? If I was wrong in any of those factors, I was a liar. Do you remember any of this?
Yeah, a little bit.
A little bit? And this was a flexibility issue, not a character issue. It's not a problem in who he is or who the student is. It's difficulty in that one feature that allows them to bend, to be resilient. So this is the strategy I use with Zach. Plan A, I'm going to be able to satisfy everything that I just said to you. Plan B, it goes different. What do we do then? He's gotten so good at it that this morning, when we found no parking in the parking lot, we had to park 2 blocks over. And what did he say? Do you remember?
We could use the exercise.
We could use the exercise. He helped me reframe it. He's learned that so well. He doesn't have nearly the anxiety about a change in plans because that's how we prime all these events. If you anticipate the need for flexibility, you are more ready for it. Are you familiar with Einstein's definition of insanity?
Yes.
Doing the same thing over and over again, expecting different results? These are people with flexibility issues. They have a hard time thinking of new solutions. They have a hard time taking in new ideas. So they keep doing the same thing, hoping it'll work eventually because that's all they can think of. So it's not necessarily stubbornness. It's difficulty with resourcefulness, considering other ideas. Last one, metacognition. But we can think of it as self-monitoring. These are the people who have difficulty answering for themselves to the question, how am I doing? They're doing a bunch of things, but they're not able to monitor the results they're getting in real time. So you'll see them in social situations where they're making all kinds of social faux pas. And the people around them are making it very obvious that they're not being well received, but they're the ones who miss it because they have difficulty with the self-monitoring. They also miss the feedback from other people. Kids who don't seem to learn from experience, problem with metacognition. They're not cued into the feedback they're getting in their environment. So what do? There's a young man I'm working with who has serious problems with this issue. One thing we found that worked beautifully for him is he does not enter a social situation without a desired outcome. You gonna go talk to that kid over there? Okay. When he goes in there, he has no plan. He just wants to talk to the kid. He acts very randomly, very impulsively. Kid gets ticked off and walks away from him. So we had to get laser focused. What's the outcome with this young man? I want to say hi to him. Great. What do you do first? Well, I'm going to say hi. I'm going to introduce myself. Okay, is there anything that you're expecting him to say in response? I want him to say hi back. Great. Then what? So he's operating according to a plan with specific feedback that he's looking for. He's creating specific events, waiting for specific events to come back. Because he has all those targets, his focus is zeroed in of all the information that could be coming in. Now he knows what to prioritize. What's important for me to pay attention to here? What if you don't get that feedback? Oh, maybe it means I'm not having the results that I want. You see how that works? Work from a plan. What's your outcome? What steps do you need to take to accomplish that outcome? What specific feedback do you need from the other person to know whether you've been effective? It's learning to consciously look for these things that makes a difference. Because we know these things are not instinctive with our kiddos. They're just not going to sense it from the ether. It's a conscious act. So it's just saying, go play with those kids. I don't know what to do. Oh, you'll figure it out. You're setting them up for failure. Send them in with a plan. Other considerations. I mentioned it a little bit earlier, but one thing that's really, really important to understand about executive functions. Stress makes them worse. If a child is anxious, overwhelmed in class and says, I need a break, oh, just finish those last 2 problems first. Seriously? When they're stressed, their executive function issues that are already challenged are in the toilet, and you want them to do an organized activity. No. Give them the break they asked for so they can be more organized and come back. The world will not end if those 2 problems wait until later. Also think about context. Take your child into a quiet setting where they can deconstruct and process. If you try and problem solve in the very noisy classroom that caused the problems to begin with, you're adding insult to injury. Go someplace else to calm things down, then have the conversation. When you're not trying to plan and prioritize whether to listen to all the noise in the room or the teacher who's trying to support you. Because all voices can take on equal priority and become one noise in your head because you can't sort them out. So kids that have sound sensitivity tend to have that challenge. All noises are equal. So in order to be able to have a conversation, I need it one-on-one, not in a cafeteria. Because I can't hear you, I hear everything. And anybody who believes that eating in a cafeteria is a life skill is kidding themselves. So in a nutshell, that's Executive Functioning 101. There are 11 as they're currently understood. They all have different functions. They cause similar problems in some cases. But what it essentially comes down to is it's all about leading a deliberate, proactive, organized life. It begins with your goals. What experiences do you want for yourself? What opportunities do you have? What opportunities do you want? And how are you going to get there? If you have these difficulties, it's difficult to create a plan and follow a plan. It doesn't mean you are forever doomed to stay put. It just means you need to align yourself with the relationships, with the people that have those skill sets, so you can partner with them so that you can live the life that you want and deserve. Simply being poor at something doesn't mean you're being left out. It means that you are not intended to be a solo act in this life. None of us are. We are a community, neighbors, educators, a family. We need to look to each other. We need to utilize each other's strengths so that when we're at the top of the mountain, we're not looking down by ourselves. They say it's lonely at the top. That's only when you don't take people with you. So hopefully this has been helpful, and you now realize that it's not a matter of motivation, whether you can or whether you can't. It's more often simply a lack of resources. So hopefully you know a little bit more now about what the issues are, what the gap looks like, how to fill it, and have the tools now to go forward and help your students, yourselves, and your colleagues to be even more successful than they were before. And I'm going to end with my customary parting words. Thanks for being you. Have a great day, folks.